Welcome to my review of Mad Gear for the arcade. And this footage is all going to be from my 1cc tutorial, which is where I beat the game on 1 credit. The way the game normally works is that if you waste a life, basically if you die, you have to start the stage back from the beginning if you use a continue. But you have unlimited continues, you just have to pay for them. You know, if you're playing on MAME, of course, you just put in virtual credits. But the game is console style in that it does penalize you for death. You can't just keep putting in coins or credits and pay to win. You do have to redo each stage from the beginning. So you have to at least beat each stage from the beginning. There's not too many stages. It's not a real long game. As you can see in the first loop I show here, it's not much longer than 10, 11 minutes to beat it if you don't waste a life. You basically have to no-death run the game to get a 1cc run. But you can explode plenty of times. What happens is if your car does explode, or if you fall in any pits or anything like that, a transportation type of machine will kind of come up and let you respawn at a certain part in the stage. So you can do that, but if you keep doing that, you waste tons of fuel. When your fuel bar drains, that's when you actually die. So you have that fuel bar at the top that says empty and full, and you can pick up gas cans to keep your fuel topped off. You want to try to keep it as high as you can so that you don't run out, obviously. So you try to collect those whenever you can. And it's a lot of memorization and practice of just learning the levels, but I didn't find the game to be too difficult to get a 1 credit on. So it was a fun game to do that with. It didn't take me super long to get that. But it's not a very difficult game if you're just looking to beat it. It's pretty easy. I mean, if you've played, a lot of older games, you're probably not going to have too much trouble with this game. It's definitely on the easier end for an arcade game, which, arcade games tended to be much harder than a lot of console games on average. So this is one of the relatively easy arcade games. This is a lot like Bump and Jump, but this is I would say the best game that I've played in this style, in this Bump and Jump type of style. And there's not a ton of these type of games, but this is a really, really good one. And it plays great. The music fits. The music is good. The visuals are great. I mean, everything just fits well. The game plays great. There's no slowdown or anything that I noticed. Everything plays smooth. And the basic idea is just, you control your acceleration and you control your jumping. And you just got to avoid all the obstacles and try to make it to the end as fast as possible. Collect fuel cans to replenish fuel, which, as I said, is your timer. And, of course, if that fuel drains, then you lose the stage. So then you have to start back from the beginning of the stage. But, yeah, it's a simple concept. But it gets pretty dense. You get invincibility frames whenever you do a jump. So spamming jump when you're good at the game can actually be quite useful because, if you spam it, you're going to be in the air a lot and you're not going to be able to get hit. Now, the downside, if you recklessly spam jumping all the time, you're probably going to fall in pits and shit if you don't know the levels. So, you do have to know what you're doing, obviously. But it is a very good move to use heavily when there's a lot of traffic and shit like that and not a lot of jumps. It's kind of good to spam jumping if you can do it. So yeah, here in this review, I'm actually showing the full first playthrough of the game because it's a short game. For some of these shorter games, I haven't been editing them down for the reviews. I've just been showing the full playthrough. So you're going to see that here, and then I'm going to show a little bit of the second loop I did on my 1 credit run. I made it pretty far into the second loop, but I used a different vehicle, so probably if I would have stuck with this vehicle, I probably, possibly would have beat the game again for another loop, but I'm not sure. I think it gets a little bit harder on the second loop. I think it was noticeably harder, actually, but I haven't played in a while. But you can pick between 3 vehicles. The truck is very heavy and slow, but I believe it's not affected too much by terrain changes, so it can pretty much plow through sand and shit like that, whereas this car will get slowed down significantly by certain terrain like sand. And the race car gets pretty much crippled by things like sand. It gets almost slowed down to a complete stop. But the race car is the fastest overall vehicle. So, they all balance out in different ways. I like the middle. The middle vehicle is the most balanced. And that's the one I like to use. But, there is replayability because you can also try to challenge yourself by beating the game with the other vehicles, you know, or just try to find one that you like by experimenting. So it gives it some more replayability. It was a very addictive game, I found. I thought it was really enjoyable because once I had a goal at the game of trying to get the 1cc run, I really enjoyed playing the game. And it's a lot of fun. Even if you just want to beat it normally, it's a lot of fun, but it probably won't take you too long since, you will just start at the beginning of the stage and you just have to learn each stage individually. But they're really not, there's no stages that are super hard or anything. You just have to know what's coming up and get used to it. But it's a really fun game. And one that I've never really heard about before, so I thought this would be a good one to put a review out for, to get the information out. And I'll post a link to my 1cc tutorial of the game, which will go into all the strategies I used and things like that. But a lot of it is really just memorizing the layout. But there are little nuances and strategies that can help make things easier. So some players may find that useful as a little extra video to watch on the game. The stage layouts are pretty cool. You see here there's sand in certain areas and pavement, and when you go on the sand, you're going to go drive like way, way slower, especially if you're using a race car. It pretty much cripples the speed. So that's why you see me jumping over a lot of those sand patches and trying to land mostly on the asphalt to keep my speed up. So that's what I'm doing here, and you're going to do shit like that as you play the game. That's you're going to want to avoid the slower terrain as much as possible by jumping a lot. That keeps your speed up, and collect those gas canisters, which you're going to be able to memorize where they're located by replaying the stages. And eventually, you're probably going to barely beat some of the later stages, with barely any fuel left, but you'll be able to beat them. It comes together pretty quickly with practice, but it's a very enjoyable game. I always really liked games like Bump and Jump and Breakthrough. Breakthrough for the NES was kind of a fun game. I mean, it's not a great game, but it's pretty enjoyable. But this is like a way better version than any of those games that that played in this style, where you basically just are viewing your car from, well, in this case it's an overhead view. Breakthrough was kind of a side type of view, but it was a little bit overhead too. It was kind of a mix. But, I think this is the best of these type of games that I've played, where it's, just obstacle avoidance with the vehicle, and jumping, bumping, as they say, with the bump and jump game. But I thought this was a really good game in this style. So I definitely thought this would be one that would be worth checking out. You have to make some pretty precise jumps, as you can see later on. And if you miss these jumps, you lose a lot of fucking time. And sometimes if you use your transport to get back on solid land, you may have to drop into a pit because you can only ride the transport for a short period of time. So you really don't want to fall in those holes. You can really end up losing all your time. But, you do learn the stages. They're really not, none of the stages are long or anything. So you only have to survive for a little while. So you will learn the layouts eventually. You can bump into the cars too without actually exploding, but it does slow you down a lot, and there's really no reason to do it unless, you don't have a choice. But usually I would prefer to jump over them or jump on top and land on top of the enemies, which will kill them. And you do have to watch out for the helicopters and things like that. The helicopter itself won't hurt you. The body of the helicopter, you can't touch, bang into that or anything. But you got to watch out for the missiles. The little explosions that they make on the ground are what will actually kill you, and then, of course, waste your time, because that's basically what this game is. Whenever you explode like this, it wastes your fuel and your time. And sometimes you may not be able to make it back to land if you miss a few jumps. But, it's pretty forgiving. It's not too bad. Some of the stages can be really tight with timing, and you have to have them down pretty well to beat them. But, the game doesn't offer any kind of extreme challenge or anything like that. It's probably quite a bit harder if you play with something like the truck, which is the slowest vehicle. I'm not sure what real advantages that vehicle has aside from not being affected too much by different terrain types. But, most of the stages don't have terrain that really slows you down. There's not really a lot of that on most of the stages, so I don't really know what the benefit of the truck is. I think the truck may just be almost like a hard mode for the game. And of course, it does seem to get harder when the game loops, and it may get harder on each loop, so there may be that kind of replayability if you're into that. but it does offer a decent amount of replayability, and it's fun just trying to get like a 1 credit run on the game. It was a fun game to play through like that. I found it satisfying to complete the 1cc. So for me, that was a cool incentive to play the game, and I did enjoy it at the time when I was trying to do that. But as you get farther in, the stages do get harder. There's more like narrow jumps and platforms you have to land on, and there's a lot more vehicles and shit, like things in your way that slow you down, which all adds up when you're trying to get to the end of the stage on a fuel meter, which is basically a time meter that you can replenish by collecting gas cans. So, and that's really all there is to the game. There's a few power-ups, like I think this is kind of like a shield or something like that, but I don't think it lasts too long. The main thing you're going to be trying to collect is not really going to be power-ups. You're mainly going to want those fuel cans when you can get them. And you can control your speed, so you don't have to always be traveling at full speed, but, the levels can encourage you to speed a lot, some of the harder areas, because you don't want to, you want to make it through as fast as you can. So I believe this is the final stage, Sky City, and this one has a lot of platforming, which is pretty cool. It does mix things up a lot by being heavy on platforming. So you really need to know the jumps here. But it didn't take me too long to learn. It's really not that hard, but it's a lot of fun. And even when you land, of course, a lot of times there's going to be craters in the ground waiting for you to kill you from the helicopter blast. So, you always have to try to be a few steps ahead of what's going on. But yeah, really enjoyable game. Really cool arcade game that I never heard about before. So when I discovered it, I was just fucking around on MAME, and I probably saw the preview of the game most likely, and of course, I could immediately tell this looked like something that I would enjoy. So then I started, just started playing it, and I believe after going through it normally with starting the stages over and learning them, the normal way. Shortly after, I wanted to do a 1cc run because I just enjoyed the game a lot. I rarely ever do 1cc runs. Intentionally of like arcade games or console games. Sometimes they just happen because I just happen to learn a game very well, and I end up beating a game without using a continue. But most of them are not planned 1cc runs. But there has been a few, like Double Dragon, which is another one I did a tutorial on. But yeah, so after beating the game, I edited out the ending. See here, you can select your vehicles, but after you beat the game, you can't select the vehicle that you already beat the game with. So it narrows it down. So then the game kind of forces you to use the other vehicles you haven't tried yet. So you could always try to beat all 3 loops of the game with all 3 vehicles. That's probably pretty challenging to do on a single credit. Or you can probably just, try to go through them all. You don't have to do it on a single credit. You can just play the game normally and start the stage over if you fail with the vehicle you selected, and just try to beat the game that way. So it can offer a nice little incentive to keep playing the game, because the vehicles do handle differently and you have to play differently. Things do get also faster and more aggressive on each loop. So you have that as well. So it does give it a nice little challenge to try to go through it all 3 times. So there really is a lot of replayability. And I think it's a game that'll, players that are into these kind of games, I think you'll enjoy this game a lot. And I'd give it a 7.5 out of 10. Thanks for watching.